Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's Thursday morning, 17th day of October. We are more than halfway through the month of October, this 2024 year of our Lord. Thanks for joining us. Coming up at 7:05, Representative Barry Loudermilk of Georgia, all over the January 6th committee investigation. 7:35, Brent Bozell. 8:05, KT McFarland. And then at 8:35, our buddy Sean Spicer. And joining us all morning long is our buddy Mercedes Schlapp. Good morning, Mercedes.
Oh, buddy? What is
Hey,
that?
You're my buddy. You're my buddy.
My
You're my
buddy.
pal.
Oh, my
Sister
Lord.
from a different mother. Although, honestly, I've met your mother, and knowing my dad back in the day, and I wouldn't put it past him.
My mother's like 5 feet tall. I mean, she's like the tiniest woman known to me. You know who she loves? Can I tell you who she loves?
Well, she
She
loves
loves
her
Sean
son-in-law, Matt.
Spicer.
Oh, she
No,
loves
she
Sean
does love
Spicer.
Matt, but she loves Sean Spicer.
She loves
She's
Sean
like,
Spicer
"Oh."
because finally she's found a man that she can look eye to eye with.
Pretty much,
They're both,
yeah.
So both sort of pocket-sized. We're going to bring up some discussion about Pennsylvania and how there's a lot of infighting and anonymous suggestions within the Democrats and Kamala Harris's campaign that they're just a complete basket case in Pennsylvania. But really quickly, I do want to add this. We just spent the first hour sort of unpacking the Kamala Harris-Bret Baier interview, but there's one other element that needs to be heard, and that is what Bret Baier said after the interview later that evening on Fox News Channel, a little behind-the-scenes action.
So we were supposed to start at 5 p.m. This was the time they gave us. Originally, we were going to do 25 or 30 minutes. They came in and said, well, maybe 20. So it was already getting whittled down. And then the vice president showed up about 5:15. We were pushing the envelope to be able to turn it around for the top of the 6 o'clock. So that's how it started. And I could tell when we started talking that she was going to be tough to redirect without me trying to interrupt. I did this with President Obama. At one point, I just said, Mr. President, I know you like the filibuster. I just didn't even have the chance to sometimes redirect in those ways. I had a lot of other questions.
Yeah, so that's quite an image. And by the way, apparently there were 4 staffers off camera who were like waving and saying, "Cut it off, cut it off."
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
because I
please.
do think that, look, when you're on the president's schedule or the vice president's schedule, it's hard, okay, because you're doing all these multiple events. Now, Kamala doesn't do a lot of events.
No.
So you do try to keep things on time. I totally understand that. So that one, I don't know. That one, I'd be like, okay, fine. She got there late.
She
big
had plenty
deal.
of time for Charlemagne the God. She had plenty of time for The View.
Yeah, but
She had
like
plenty of
there's so
time.
much logistics that go into moving like a principal. I'm not saying that I'm defending Kamala Harris, but I do have to say that's probably one of the, I would say, weaker arguments. Like at the end of the day, like you're given the 10, 15, you got to make it up at the end, right? Like you try to, you
That's
know.
what Brett's
the
talking
reality
about
is
here.
that the staffers knew that it was a very bad interview, and then they're trying to salvage it by waving over to Bret Baier saying, cut the interview off. Last question, wrap up. Now, you're supposed to do that as a staffer, right? You're supposed to say
and
last
I've
question.
been interviewing principals before, and you always see it in the corner of your eye. They're trying to tell you to, wrap
I've
it up.
done
We
that
gotta
to
wrap
you
it up.
when
you
you've
have done
interviewed
that
President
to me,
Trump.
actually, when you were
I'm
working
like,
for
wrap,
President
and then
Trump.
of course President Trump's like, no, we have like 10 more minutes. We're fine.
Exactly.
Keep going, Larry.
It's fine,
We're-
Larry.
keep
Go
going.
ahead. Ask me more.
Yes.
All right, so let's turn to Pennsylvania. Here's the Politico headline from yesterday. Quote, Pennsylvania is such a mess, unquote. Inside Team Harris's unusual levels of finger pointing, many of the state's most well-connected Democrats have been worried about the operation for months. Top Democrats in Pennsylvania are worried Vice President Kamala Harris's operation is being poorly run in the nation's biggest battleground state. They say some Harris aides lack relationships with key party figures, particularly in Philadelphia and its suburbs. They complain they have been left out of events and surrogates haven't been deployed effectively. Now, there's nothing new for state operatives to have a disconnect and feel like the national campaign doesn't know what they're doing in the state and that they should defer to them. What is new is for this kind of thing to emerge before Election Day and have this anonymous finger pointing going on.
Well, what that to me is fascinating. So, and Politico is more center left kind of political coverage. So for them to really get this story is a big deal because of the mere fact that you're having this separation with what's happening on the grassroots level, on the state campaign level and what's happening with the national campaign. And so what's interesting to me is when I read this article, there was no mention of Governor Josh Shapiro, which normally you tap into the infrastructure in place of the sitting governor, right?
Yes.
And then you work with them to build out the
Democrats who know how to win statewide.
Yes. And guess what's happening? No mention of Josh Shapiro. And it's these local people saying, we're going to lose Philadelphia because they're not putting in resources into Philadelphia. Interestingly enough, the Kamala's campaign, they're shifting resources from places like Wisconsin into Pennsylvania. That's very significant because they must be looking at the numbers and saying, we're going to lose Pennsylvania. There's no way we can win it. Everything, again, very tight in the margins. I will say when you're seeing, the Scott Presslers of the world, which he's doing a lot of registration of voters. We've seen in many of these counties in Pennsylvania, more Republicans registering to vote. So that's very promising. The key will be who's chasing the ballot. Are they bringing it home? Can they make sure that the ballots get in there? And of course, with Pennsylvania, they've had so many craziness with the laws where, now apparently it has to get there before, 3 days or like 3 days post-election or something like that. There's been some changes in the law in Pennsylvania as well.
But you just mentioned something very interesting, that now there's reports that they're shifting resources from Milwaukee to the Philadelphia area because they are concerned that they've got a problem in Philadelphia, and so they needed more money. I thought they raised like $1 billion in 2 months, so the fact that they have to shift resources is kind of stunning. They should have enough money to spread out over those states. But if you're moving money from Milwaukee, is that because you think you've got Wisconsin in the bag, or is
that's
it because
interesting.
or are they like, all right, we can afford to lose Wisconsin, but we sure can't afford to lose Pennsylvania. Of those three, Pennsylvania is the biggest one.
Well, for both campaigns, yes. Kamala Harris cannot lose Pennsylvania. Pretty much, I think when you look at the map, it's very tough. I think President Trump has to win Pennsylvania and then win one of the Rust Belt states. I'm actually more concerned about one of those Wisconsins and Michigans. And I think, Minnesota's always tough. They always say, oh, yes, it's in play. Well,
I don't think Minnesota's in play, but you make a good point. All Trump needs to do is win one of those, assuming
one of the Rust Belt states.
Assuming he wins Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona.
Which are all trending in his direction.
Yes. If he loses one of those three, it gets harder.
Oh, it's horrible.
But then he has to win two out of those three.
Yeah. It makes me I don't even want to go back to 2020. I remember being that day of the election. Donald Trump shows up at the campaign, and Jared Kushner is there. And I've worked with Jared for years, and Jared comes up to me. I had to ask him, I'm like, how are you feeling? Like, he kind of steps into my office, and he goes to me, I feel good. We're going to win Wisconsin. I've looked at all the numbers. We're going to win this state. We're going to win that state. And then just to watch everything crumble that night. It was one of the most painful nights that I think,
if not that night, sometime middle of the next day, or with all the insanity.
Well, Wisconsin went from, we were up by 100,000 votes, and then the next day, it vanished.
Tell me about it.
Surprisingly enough.
By the way, real fast, I had said from the beginning, even before he picked J.D. Vance, I said if they pick J.D. Vance, it's really about those voters that he knows so well in eastern Ohio, which are the same voters in western Pennsylvania. J.D. Vance absolutely nails those voters. He's spent a lot of time there. That's, northern Appalachia, that's fracking. It's devastated communities because of the Democrat policies, and he speaks their language. He's been really effective there. They just sent Tim Walz to the same area, Allegheny County, and Tim Walz in his flannel shirt there, acting like, just a regular guy.
And Senator Vance, he became a media darling. He wrote a book about the place he grew up, but the premise was trashing that place where he grew up rather than lifting it up. This guy's a venture capitalist cosplaying like he's a cowboy or something. I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time.
I don't think
he is the oddest man in America. He is the Oddest man in America. I'm sorry.
Do you think
Crazy.
sending your running mate out there to try to get votes in Western Pennsylvania by saying, I have no idea how the economy works?
I don't even know what a venture capitalist is, but wow. I mean, don't you feel like you're in good hands with Walz?
Oh, yeah.
Seriously.
Oh, God. It's
He's
6:15.
like the weirdest. Sorry.
That's all right. Hold that thought. 6:15 WM. So Mercedes, there was a big push earlier this week for Kamala Harris to make inroads into the black community, specifically black male voters. I'm not talking about voters who will blackmail you to get your vote. No, I mean men who are black. Well, you got to be clear when you say blackmail.
What did they do? Did they move off of white dudes for Harris? I mean, it goes from like white dudes for Harris. No. The black dudes for Harris.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you can't make this up.
Yeah, I know. It is weird.
It's
although
it's so weird.
I have to say they've been very efficient because the white dudes for Harris actually seems to be the exact same sort of group as the gay dudes for Harris. So that's good. There's a lot of overlap there, which is nice if you look at that ad they did.
You're so funny.
All right,
gosh,
so
I forget how funny you are.
Let's not forget Kamala Harris's opportunity agenda for black men included legalizing pot, creating opportunities for black Americans to succeed in selling pot,
Right.
Cryptocurrency investments so black men who make them will be protected. This is protecting cryptocurrency investments for black men. And then, of course, the crown jewel of this plan for black entrepreneurs, 1 million loans that are fully forgivable, which basically means free money, up to $20,000 specifically for black entrepreneurs to start a business. Now, that was rolled out earlier this week, and then she did some media to support it. And the whole idea was, we need to appeal to black men. And a lot of us were seeing this, Mercedes, and looking and saying, how is this legal? You can't do that. You can't say we've got all these programs, but only if your skin color is black and only if you have male genitalia. It doesn't. I do
feel
cuts
this
across
is,
every discrimination law at the federal level.
Well, I feel that it will be challenged in court. There's no question. I think we've seen this before, for example, with giving money to black farmers.
Right.
That was a big thing as well. So that they will end up in court.
Well, the black farmer thing,
is,
that was the Pigford thing, and they only got it through because they had to show specific circumstances of discrimination at the hands of the Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
It was still a boondoggle. Don't get me started down that rabbit hole. Andrew Breitbart and I spent years on it. But no, wait. It's not going to get challenged in court because the Kamala Harris campaign has already changed their policy. It's only been 3 days since they rolled this great program out for black people, specifically for black men. And now the Wall Street Journal says the Harris campaign said that these programs will be open to all Americans on a race-neutral basis.
Because you forgot this is called the opportunity economy. I mean, who the heck comes up with that slogan? It's like, let's sit here and talk about opportunity economy.
Don't take us down a rabbit hole. This isn't about opportunity economy. This is about the fact that they rolled this out and said this is for black people, and then within 2 days said, oh, no, it's not for black people, it's for all people. They immediately changed it. So in their messaging saying these programs are specifically just for black Americans, within 2 days they said, oh, forget that whole thing about black people. It's really for everybody. Because they knew it was discriminatory.
They said, it turns out the words and others are they included the word and others. So now it's black men and others.
Right.
So this could pretty much apply to anyone. Look,
exactly. So it's not an opportunity agenda for black men.
I kind of keep picturing this Kamala campaign where they sit around a room and they're like, yeah, let's come up with this agenda for black men because we're looking at the poll numbers and the poll numbers are really bad. I mean, Kamala Harris is polling 78% with black voters as opposed to Biden at 90%. Think about that. That is a huge shift. There is no enthusiasm for this woman. She goes on radio, TV, she changes her accent. Larry, I am telling you that the black men are looking at this, the black women are looking at this and saying, wait a second. I can't trust this woman with my family. In fact, the Zeke Williams, who was this radio host that she was on the show, basically made this really interesting comment where they're like, you know what? The Democrats, the black people, we have voted for Democrats, heavily supported Democrats with little in return.
Yeah.
They themselves are waking up to the reality that the Democrat Party has failed them time and time again. And now that they have gone so far left on allowing biological men to play in women's sports, where they're allowing kind of this radicalized gender ideology, the indoctrination of their children, talk about the economy and how prices continue to rise, the black community is going, I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm
No.
not getting anything out of Kamala Harris.
In fact, you're
just because she's black.
antithetical to me trying to raise my family and actually be a good husband and a good father.
Exactly.
Imagine that. Imagine you're a black man in America. You're married. You have kids. You're struggling. Things cost too much. You're trying to do the right thing. You've got a job. Maybe you've got 2 jobs because the cost of living is so bad. And Kamala Harris comes in and says, I understand.
I understand.
I know your problem, so here's my program for you.
My
Specifically
program
for
is
you
can get a free abortion. That's what you can get. Or you can get a sex change.
Your daughter can change
That's it.
And pretend she's a boy. And if you need
Yeah.
help with your, making money, you can sell drugs. We'll legalize it for you. And by the way, if you use drugs, you can go ahead and use drugs too, because that'll take the edge off. And now, 2 days later, forget it. That's not just for black men. That's for everybody. Everybody can sell drugs now.
Everybody can sell drugs.
That's the opportunity economy. We all have the opportunity to get stoned and sell drugs to each other. 623.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:36 now. O'Connor and Company, thanks for tuning in here on the 17th day of October, this Thursday. Coming up at 7:05, Representative Barry Loudermilk will join us. We'll follow up on those Liz Cheney communications with Cassidy Hutchinson. Unbelievable. 7:35, Brent Bozell has plenty to say about the interview yesterday with Bret Baier, Kamala Harris. 8:05, KT McFarland. And then Sean Spicer. Wrap things up with him. I'm Larry O'Connor with Mercedes Schlapp, who you're actually... Is it true that you and Sean Spicer used to date?
We didn't date. Why are you causing these rumors? Give me a break.
I'm just going where the news sends me.
No, but like back in the day when Ari Fleischer, he was kind of bald back then, but we did. There was a lot of, we were all very single, and so there was some interest, but I don't think he was interested in me.
Oh,
but then
really?
Brett Kavanaugh was a big catch back in the day too, but
Sure.
he was smarter than everybody else, and then he married great Ashley Kavanaugh.
Yes.
So yeah, there was a lot of these single great guys at the White House at the time, but I went for Matt Schlapp. He was my catch.
There were all these great single guys at the White House, but I ended up with Matt.
Well,
that's fine. No.
No, I mean, we've been married for 23 years.
We've got the
He
audio
was my
set.
pick, okay?
Yeah,
like, he
all
was
right.
totally my pick. I was focused on, like, dating Matt Schlapp. It took him a while to ask me out. I was like, dude, I'm like a hot Latina. Give me a break. Come on. I'm so sassy and fun. Took forever.
I'm going to move on now. Hey, remember this moment from the debate in September? I'm sure you do, because it involved David Muir in one of those famous ABC News fact checks.
Crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime.
I know it won't come as a shock to anyone, but the news is out yesterday. Trump was right.
Of course.
The FBI statistics were fraudulent. We've been telling you this, by the way, because the major cities did not actually interface with the FBI crime statistics. They estimated cities like Los Angeles and D.C. and Baltimore and New York and other major cities. But it took the sharp eye of John Lott, who's a frequent guest on this program, friend of the program, at Real Clear Investigations, to find this stealth edit of the crime statistics from 2022. They have revised the violent crime data. Originally, they claimed that there was a 2.1% drop in violent crime. It was actually a 4.5% increase. That's a difference of nearly 7 percentage points in terms of crime. Of course, everyone's lived experience saw the crime was up, so it was laughable, this lie. But they've used this for months now to say, oh, you keep saying crime is up, but crime is actually down. No. They just changed the numbers quietly. They didn't do a press release. They didn't do a press conference. But John Lott saw it. He printed it up yesterday, and now we know the truth. Crime has gone up under Joe Biden.
Okay, anyone with a brain would know that violent crime is up. Okay, you go to any of these major cities, and it's just visible between the carjackings, between, the increase of just people on drugs in these cities. I mean, it's a disaster, okay? Yeah. You've seen in these also towns where you've got the Tren de Aragua, which are the Venezuelan criminals, coming in and taking over some of these complex apartment buildings in Texas, in Colorado. What's disgusting to me, Larry, is the fact that that the FBI really waited
Yeah.
to then do this edit to their report to say, oh, yeah, actually, no, it's not down 2%. No, it's up 4%, over 4%. I mean, that is, to me, it drives me crazy. It shows the government's lack of accountability, especially the FBI, which the American people don't trust anyways. And the fact is that, like, you have these bureaucrats that are just working day in and day out, and you're like going, okay, like, get it right. Like, that's your job. Yeah. Like, and then they don't get the information right until now, 19 days before an election. And when Donald Trump had to defend himself and say, wait a second.
Of course.
Like, the violent crimes are up. And they're like, no.
Right. They called him a liar. They called, the
Yes.
fact checks and all the headlines. Trump says without evidence that crime is up. And the kind of crime, by the way, we're talking violent crime here. We're talking about murders, the 1,700 murders that were unaccounted for. How do you lose a murder? I understand. Listen, I always lose one of my socks, right? I don't understand how that happens. And I got to look under my bed as I get, where's my sock that I'm missing, right? Or sometimes a slipper. But 1,700 murders, 7,700 rapes, 33,000 robberies, and 37,000 aggravated assaults that were never counted, and now the FBI revises those numbers. Oh, hey, everybody. But they didn't even do that. They didn't say, hey, everybody. They just put the new number out, and thank God for John Lott. John Lott is he's so good at looking at these numbers, looking at statistics. He, of course, is the author of More Guns, Less Crime. And he did a great job with this article, and you really need to see it. This comes from his organization, the Crime Prevention Research Center.
Yeah.
And he's quoted here, speaking about the article, for some reason the media picked crime data that they think goes and makes the Democrats look as good as possible. Well, we know what the reason is. And they even, when the crime data that they've relied on turns out to be the very source of the data, proves to be wrong, none of them fix it. That's right. Well, and where are the corrections across the board
Well,
now?
Can I say that? And it's interesting because this one article says FBI quietly updates crime data to show big jump in violence under Biden-Harris administration. To me, the mere fact that they do not go out and do a press conference on this to say, hey, guys, we really screwed up on this.
Got it wrong.
It's actually up 4.5% in terms of violent crimes. Then you're talking about that there was 80,000 more violent crimes than in 2021.
Yes.
This is the 2022 numbers.
A 4.5% increase.
Yeah, 1,699 murders. How do you exactly what you were saying? How do you just mess that up? So quietly.
Crime, like the border, like the economy, like everything else that's fallen apart in this administration, in the Biden-Harris administration, their entire position has been, who are you going to believe? Your lying eyes or our government bureaucrats who are telling you everything's great? And, well, we know who to believe. Liam Payne, who arguably had an absolutely angelic voice, he was, of course, a member of One Direction, one of the boy bands that sort of was part of that whole wave of boy bands, when it was such a big move in the 2000s. He was One Direction, one of the British bands. In fact, wasn't that wasn't One Direction discovered and managed by Simon Cowell? Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. He was found dead Wednesday after we're told he fell from his hotel balcony in Buenos Aires.
It's so tragic. I mean, my girls were devastated. I got the call from my oldest, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, Liam died from, One Direction." They, of course, are still big One Direction fans. Yeah. And then, the girls are heartbroken because he had an incredible, beautiful voice, but sadly, I think he was one of them that struggled with drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. And there was definitely a sense of just, a lot of darkness surrounding this young man. And it's just so tragic. And he apparently fell off of the balcony of the hotel room, and he died of serious injuries, according to the Argentine police.
Yeah, it's Listen, it needs to be investigated. There's a lot. There were calls to the police. Apparently, a hotel manager called because there was a quote aggressive man who could be under the influence of drugs or alcohol that they were complaining about right after 5 p.m.
Yeah.
And then the hotel manager could be heard on a 911 call obtained by the Associated Press saying they had a guest who is overwhelmed with drugs and alcohol. He's destroying the entire room, and we need you to send someone, please. And then the manager's voice, according to the Associated Press, becomes more anxious as the call went on, noting the room and a balcony.
Yeah.
And then within moments of that, he fell to his death, I guess, it appears. Again, that seems to be the initial reports, but they should check to see if there's any foul play as well, especially when you've got aggressive behavior and drug use and that sort of thing. It's just so tragic. He's 31 years old.
I know.
And
he leaves behind a 7-year-old son, Bear Gray Payne, with his former girlfriend, this musician, Cheryl Cole. And, it's just, you get to a point that this is something that's, I think, been affecting so many people. I mean, so many young people, which is they turn to drugs and alcohol. There's this addiction, then the mental health issues. I mean, they spiral down, and it's just so depressing. Yeah. It's depressing to watch. He had all this fame, all this money, and then at the end of the day, he's just so miserable.
Yeah.
So sad.
It's you're right. It happens to a lot of young people. It also specifically happens to young people who get a lot of fame and a lot of money, and they're in the high-flying world of entertainment, various avenues of entertainment, in this case the music industry, and there's no grounding, there's no basis and foundation that they have to sort of stay grounded, stay moral, stay focused on what's important in life.
That's right.
And it's, again, a great lesson for all of us who think that we envy people who are in the spotlight and who have all the money and have all the cars and have all the men or women, depending on what you're into.
Look, the only person you and I envy, it's Sean Spicer. Let's be real, Larry.
Well, that's who I was describing. Rest in peace, Liam Payne. I'm sorry. We try to laugh through the pain.
We have to lighten it up because this
sad.
is pretty depressing.
And listen to a little One Direction. Watch a little X Factor. That's where they were all discovered on X Factor on the British television show, and then they Simon Cowell put them all together, made the band, and everyone makes money off these people, but they never stop and try to make sure that they're okay.